Hello and welcome to the ellenmade book club and our first ever actual book club meeting. I'm really excited and a bit nervous, and we'll see how this goes, but yeah, I'm really happy you're here, and let's get started, I guess. I'm a bit nervous because all of this is very new to me, and I've been setting the bar really high for myself and stressing myself out a bit, and then I'm trying to remind myself that this is for fun, and all of you who are watching are very kind and understanding people. So I don't really need to put all of that pressure on myself, or on you for that matter. And yeah, I'm sure it will be fine and fun, and yeah, I'm just excited to get it going already. So I guess I will start by just explaining the setup for the book club, I guess, like in case anyone is new. I pick prompts from my TBR jar. My choice and your votes on my community tab gives us 3 books in total. I read all 3 books, you read the ones you want. I make a video as an open forum for discussion, and no other platforms or memberships are needed. And yeah, it's just for fun, and I'm trying things out, and we'll see where it goes. I have had a lot of different thoughts about how to do this, and like, is it smart to have 3 books in one video? Should there be separate videos for each book? I also wanted to prepare some questions for discussion and have a bit more structure planned out beforehand. But for now, I just need to get this done and get this going, and then we can make adjustments from here. If you have any thoughts about the format of this and the structure and the how of all of this, please let me know in the comments, and we can discuss and make adjustments next time. Okay? So the first book that I read out of these 3 was Stolen by Ann-Helén Laestadius. It follows Elsa, who is 9 years old at the beginning of this book. She is Sami, and her reindeer is killed by this local man who is very mean to her reindeer, and she is too afraid to tell the police or anybody else about what she saw. And then she is older. She's 19, I think, in the second part of the book. And yeah, she wants revenge for this killing, basically. My ambition was to talk about these books a little bit more as I read them, but as I've done before, I managed to do this once and then I kind of fell off track. But I did film a little segment after having read part 1 of this book, so I guess I'm just going to insert that here, and I'm just going to be sitting over there instead. Okay? So I'm in the process of reading Stolen. I finished part 1 last night, and I just wanted to pop in here and just ask a few questions, I guess. Like, this whole first part is set in 2008 when Elsa is 9, and that was a lot longer time spent in that period than I had expected. Like, I thought that it would be maybe a chapter or maybe like flashbacks throughout the book to that time, but it's actually like the whole first part is set in 2008. So that's my first question, like, what were your expectations versus reality on that? I also want to know what your thoughts are on the different POVs in this part of the book. Are you getting a clear image of the characters? Do you enjoy like the multiple POV? How are you finding Elsa as a 9-year-old? Another thing I was thinking about is the title of the book is Stolen, which refers to this murder of Elsa's reindeer. In Sami eyes, it's a murder, and in the eyes of the law, it's a theft. Like, this might be a sensitive topic, but it's just one that I started thinking about and I think is very interesting, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it, because I can understand how the Sami, like the reindeer, are such a big part of their life, and I can understand how they don't see them as objects that you can steal, but at the same time they do kill reindeers themselves, so isn't that also then murder? I mean, obviously it's a different way of killing an animal, like doing it with respect and with care for the animal, and you know, using all of the parts for different things, and like really making sure to not waste anything. Like that's a completely different thing to slaughtering and torturing an animal to punish their owners for something. Like that's, I'm not saying those are the same thing at all. I'm just saying it's still an animal that is killed for human purposes. And I just think that it's a very fine line, and yeah, interesting to think about. So what are your thoughts on that? Another question I wanted to ask is about the Sami themselves, like as an indigenous people. And, you know, were you aware that they existed before reading this? Did you know anything about them? Or have you learned anything about them and their way of life reading this book? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And also, I guess, like, have you learned anything about what's Sami and what's Swedish? And like, do you see any difference, or is it just like a mix? I'm just curious because I have the Swedish bias. Like, I'm reading this as a Swedish person, so I already know which parts are Swedish and which parts are Sami. So I'm just curious to know if that's clear to you, or if it's confusing, or yeah, if you have any questions on that or any thoughts. I would love to hear them. It's also gotten into discussion, or maybe not discussion, but like it's mentioning the Sami people and the attitudes, both from like Swedish people toward Sami, and Sami attitude towards Swedish people, and also like within the group, and how there's a derogatory term for people who are half Sami, or like, you know, they're not considered real Sami, or like there's this whole thing. And there's also like slurs for Sami people that's mentioned that I don't think I've ever thought of that word as a slur. It's not something I use because it's just, I don't live that far north. So this isn't a part of my daily life at all. But I just appreciate learning more about this part of my own country, and, you know, people who I have nothing bad to say about. I want them to have their rights respected like anybody else. But I just find it very interesting. Any discussion about like ethnicity and identity, and yeah, how that's formed and how that's maintained, and what consequences that has for how people interact and behave towards each other. Because I can understand that, you know, wanting to maintain your traditions and your language and your way of life. I don't think calling someone a half-blood, basically, is a good way to go about it. But at the same time, I can understand that strong sense of wanting to maintain your ethnic group, because if it becomes smaller, then all of those traditions and languages and way of life is gonna slowly disappear. Like the only way to keep that alive is to keep enough people living that life and speaking that language and keeping up with those traditions. So yeah, I just find it fascinating. And just to be clear, I'm just talking about minorities here. I'm talking about a minority group of people who defend their traditions, their language, their way of life, because it is under threat of disappearing completely if they don't maintain it and defend it. And so, yeah, I find that part of this story very fascinating, and it's a big part of why I wanted to read it in the first place. So I'm happy that it's delivering on that without being like preachy or over-explaining, but it's still giving me some background information, and like it's explaining the Sami words, and it's explaining the traditions and like their clothes and all of that. So it's not like some secret language that I can't understand. It's making me more knowledgeable, and like it's explaining those things to me that I'm not familiar with. So yeah. Okay, welcome back to present day. I have now obviously finished the whole book a few weeks ago now, actually. And I wish I would have documented my thoughts right after having finished it as well, because I feel like now that it's been a while, there are a lot of things that I don't actually remember that well, which is, that happens. And especially as I'm like reading other books since this, but that also tells me something about like how memorable of a story it was. And I'm not saying it wasn't memorable, because I definitely think that it was. But yeah, I do have a few things that I would like to discuss. Like, first of all, the ending of this book. This is the first part of a trilogy. And I knew that going into reading this book. And so I think I thought that the ending would be a bit more of a cliffhanger. And I just didn't think that it was really. Like, the ending wasn't as dramatic as I was expecting it to be, I don't think. It is dramatic, but then the book sort of continues a bit after that. And sort of there's the guilt and the fear of being found out and things like that, and it just like that would have made sense for the second book to be about that, but having that at the end of the book, I just felt like it was kind of trailing off for a bit at the end. I don't know, it wasn't. I think I would have preferred a big cliffhanger so that you really wanted to get to the next book. Yeah, I just love a good cliffhanger, so that was what I was expecting, and it wasn't really what I think I got. I also don't think it was as much of a thriller as I would have thought. It felt more like literary fiction with a touch of crime. It's more like social commentary and relationship and culture and those kinds of things, more than it is a thriller, I would say, which isn't a bad thing. It's just like expectations versus reality again. So I still think it was a really good book, and I'm happy I read it, and I definitely want to keep reading the second and third part in this trilogy to see where it goes. Now I know what to expect a bit more, I think. One of the things that I liked the most in this book is all of the relationships that Elsa has with the people around her. So with her parents and her friend Anna-Stina and her brother Lasse. And her grandparents, and yeah, there were just so many really beautiful relationships, and how people were so kind to her as a child, and how those really like shape a person. I thought that was very, very well written. I think it's very difficult to write a child and like write things from a child's perspective when you're an adult. And I think that the author did a good job of that, of like showing how a young girl would see the world and how she would see her relationships. And yeah, I just thought that was really nice and really heartwarming and true to life, I guess. Just how all of those interactions that you have when you're a child sort of impact how you view other people and how you become a person yourself. I was also thinking about how the experience of being an Indigenous person in Sweden is similar or different to being an Indigenous person in other countries. I think there are a lot of similarities and a lot of different themes that come up in this story that I've heard are common in other Indigenous groups as well, like substance abuse and suicide, and how those rates are typically higher in Indigenous groups, which is incredibly sad. And I think it's very telling if that's true for an Indigenous person in the north of Sweden as well as in the United States, for example, or in South America or wherever. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? And like, did you see any other similarities or differences? Because I'm not very well informed about Indigenous peoples in other places either, which I would really like to be. I would love to read more stories about and by Indigenous authors from different countries as well. And yeah, I just think it's a fascinating topic and a fascinating aspect of being a human on this planet. Being part of a group like that has had traditions and ways of life for so long and still maintaining them, and what that's like in this modern world where everything is so different than it used to be. It just makes me think about how unnatural so many things are that we see and use and experience every day in like modern technological life, like being on our phones all the time. Like it's so unnatural, and it's messing with our brains because our brains are not made for that. And yeah, I know that not all Indigenous people are just out in nature all the time, but it makes me reflect on what it should be being a human, I guess, and like what's natural and what really makes us feel good. Like, we're not made to sit and scroll on a phone all day. That's not what our bodies are designed for, or our brains. And so I just think it's a good reminder to have that, like, that's not what we're meant to do. That's never going to be what makes us happy, because it's not how we're wired. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. It wasn't really what I expected, but I think it's a really good book, and I really want to read the next 2 parts of it to be able to sort of judge it as a whole series. I did learn a lot about the Swedish way of life and their culture, and I'm really happy I read it, and I hope that more people do. I also put up a thing on my community tab asking if you had any questions for me, and Reney very kindly put in a few questions, so I will answer those as I go as well. And one of her questions was if I had ever seen any reindeer in real life, and to tell you a little bit about that. And I don't think that I have. I mean, I've seen other kinds of deer, like animals and like moose and stuff, but I haven't seen like this particular kind of reindeer that the Sami people herd. I don't think. I live a lot further south in Sweden, so this is not part of my everyday at all. And I have been pretty far north in Sweden, but I don't think that we ever saw any reindeer. Might have seen some like from a very far distance, like from a train or something, but not that I can remember, so sorry. So the next book I finished was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And this is set in Japan. It's set in a little coffee shop in Tokyo where the guests can travel back in time to a specific moment to meet a specific person and do something with that moment to make themselves feel better, I guess. Like, what they do in the past won't change the present, but they can still go back and find some closure to things, I guess. So there are more of these books, but in this first one there are 4 stories. So they're kind of short stories, but they're still linked. They're the same characters are working in the coffee shop, and characters sort of weave in and out of each other's stories as well. I really liked all of them, and I thought that they were all very moving and heartbreaking and heartwarming, and yeah, I just loved being in this little coffee shop. I listened to this on audiobook, I should say, as well, which I kind of regret now because I wish I could like flip through it and remind myself of things. The Lovers was probably one of my least favorite ones, but I think it was a good one to get started with, to just get into the world and but get into the whole system of it and get a sense of what the book was going to be like and the writing style and all of that. I really liked Husband and Wife. I thought that was very beautiful. I could relate to having a loved one with dementia, and that is a big aspect of that story. And yeah, I definitely cried listening to that. I thought it was very sad and very beautiful and very full of love. And I'm probably not going to talk a lot more about that one because I'm going to start crying again. So moving swiftly on, The Sisters I thought was really good as well. And I thought it was a good case of misunderstanding, I guess. Or like, I think that with siblings, it's so easy to take things for granted and like think that you have the same understanding of things, and what the other person means and wants and how they function and what their dreams are and all of that. And if you don't communicate about that and like keep communicating about that as you're growing older, I think it's really easy to get yourself into a situation that these sisters are in where they don't understand where the other one is coming from, or particularly one of them. And yeah, it was also so sad. And the last one, Mother and Daughter, was also really sad and heartbreaking. And yeah, like this whole book was really heavy. I saw someone else reviewing this book and I don't think that they finished the whole thing. I mean, I can't imagine that they did, because they were saying that the writing was too like childlike or juvenile, or like a child had wrote it. And that was not my experience at all. The language is very simple and like it's explaining simple things. Simple things are happening, but the topics of the book I found very deep and sort of philosophical, and it made me think about the relationships in my life, and I could relate to a lot of different feelings and thoughts through these stories. And I think that's why it's so widely loved, because we all have relationships in our lives, and we all have people that we probably take for granted, or we might find ourselves in a situation where we wish we had done something different before it was too late. And yeah, I think that's the main topic of the book and these stories. Like the first question in the book when I started listening to it was, if you could go back, who would you want to meet? And I think the question that I'm asking myself at the end of the book is more like, what do I want to say to the people in my life before it's too late? Because I can't go back. I don't have a coffee shop to go back in time and talk to people before events happened. But I can talk to the people who are in my life now, and I can start thinking now about what I will regret later if I don't do it now. So as much as I can understand that the writing style isn't for everyone, I can't imagine how you would think that a child wrote this book. But yeah, we all have different experiences when reading, which is part of the fun. So I would love to hear your thoughts about the writing style. For one, like, did you find it childish, or did you find it just simple or different or Japanese or regular, or like what are your thoughts on the writing style in this book, or these books if you have read more of them? I thought it was simplistic but still deep, which I think is an art form in and of itself. So yeah, I loved it. Another thing I saw someone talk about in their review was the concept of show don't tell, and they thought that this book was very much tell, don't show. And I had the exact opposite thought while reading it. And so I thought that was very interesting that someone had the exact opposite experience. So I would be very curious to know what your thoughts on that are, if any. And I guess that just goes to the simplicity of the language again. And like, he's standing there holding a thing of salt, and like how it's told that that's what he's doing. But when I'm reading something like that, like he's just standing there with his thing of salt, and he doesn't say anything, he doesn't move, there's no action. He's just like frozen in that spot with his thing of salt. And to me, that wasn't about the salt. To me, that was about him processing his feelings and his thoughts, and like being uncertain of what to do in that situation. And it was just a sign to me that there's something deeper going on here. Like, he's not just standing there holding the salt. That's not the point. So to me, that was showing me that he was frozen in his mind by showing me that he was frozen in that physical spot with the salt in his hand. And yeah, like there was still subtext and like things to read between the lines. So I think that's an excellent example of show, don't tell. Like telling would be saying he felt frozen and he did not know what to do. Like that would be telling. But I thought that I was being showed that because that's not what it said. It said that he was standing there with his thing of salt. And I had to sort of fill in the rest in my head. So yeah, what's your thoughts on show, don't tell in this book? I would love to know. I also read somewhere that this book was written as a play from the beginning, and like the reason why there are so many female characters is because the cast was like they had so many female actresses in the theater company. It wasn't something that I thought about while reading because there are male characters as well. But none of them actually go back in time. The ones that do are all women, which was interesting. And it's also interesting that I didn't notice. I guess it would be interesting to see in the next books if there will be male characters traveling back in time and what that's going to be like and if that's going to be different in any way. I mean, the author is a man, so it's not like he's having a female perspective. So I don't know. It would just be interesting to see if it is different and if he writes it different. I would also really like to read the story of the ghost girl, like the girl in the dress who's sitting in the chair, and like how that happened. I think they mentioned in the book that she didn't get back before the coffee got cold, and so she's stuck in this like ghost limbo time travel world where she's just drinking coffee and going to the bathroom. But yeah, I would really love to know her story, and I would also want to know what happens if someone else also misses the deadline and then would they replace her in that chair, and like where would she go, and what's going to happen with that? So overall, I really loved listening to this book. I thought it was very sweet. It was easy to listen to. The language was simple, which I appreciated, but the stories were very deep and emotional to me. And yeah, I really liked it, and I would definitely love to read more of these stories and see what else he has come up with. So the third and final book for this book club session is The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. I have mixed feelings about this book. And again, expectation versus reality. Let's start there, I guess. This is about Geeta, who lives in rural India. Her husband is no longer there, and he is presumed dead, and she is presumed to be the one who killed him. And she doesn't bother correcting anybody on that because it gives her a certain status or safety, or like people stay away from her and think that she is some kind of witch person. And so she's kind of undesirable in her community, but that also gives her like distance, which makes her lonely, but it also keeps the enemies at bay, sort of. And then there are some other women who she is in a lone group with that also want to get rid of their husbands. And so they come to her for assistance in that. And it's a story full of female empowerment and female friendships and female suffering and Indian culture, and it's written in a very funny way. There's lots of humor in this, and it's also pretty raw and coarse. And yeah, like I said, I have mixed feelings. I went into this thinking that it would be like fun and feminist and kind of a light read, and it is not. I was so angry reading this so many times. I cried, I boiled, I had to take deep breaths because the way that the women are treated by the men in the story is just absolutely horrible, and I cannot. It makes me so mad. And I know that this is a fictional story and it's not representative of all of India, which is also something that I saw in a review by an Indian person who was like, please don't think that this is all of India. And so that's important to mention as well, I think. But at the same time, I know that there are women who are suffering through events like the women in this book suffer through, and my heart breaks and it makes me really, really angry, and I just don't really know what to do with all of that. And yeah, I wasn't really prepared for all of that, but yeah, I'm really happy I read this book. I think it's a great book and I would recommend it to anyone. But yeah, it's not just for fun, it's definitely infuriating as well. Okay. Like I mentioned in my May reading vlog, the jump from the Sami culture to the Indian culture in this book was quite a leap. I guess the biggest difference, like in terms of culture, is the caste system in India, which I knew about before, but I didn't really know about all of the different levels and like what that actually meant in terms of how people treat each other and how they are treated, and how, like, what rules apply to different groups within that caste system. And I realized that that is a very old and like core element of the culture, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are sensitive to that being criticized. But like the idea of having a hierarchy of people's value, like what different people are worth, like it's one thing to have a hierarchy in a company or whatever, and like there needs to be a structure for decision making, because decision making is time consuming and exhausting, and it needs to be efficient, and you know, not everybody can be involved in any decision, so there has to be a hierarchy and a system for that. But like making a rule about who can enter a building or wear shoes or who can live in certain places, and like what jobs they have, and like how people look at them and treat them, like, no, I don't, that's not something that I can ever agree with or think is good in any way. And like, I'm just basing that off of what I've read in this. I haven't done a deep study of the caste system in India, so I'm not very well informed in terms of like how it actually works. I know this is a fictional story and all of that, but yeah, like I said, just the idea of like ranking people, no, let's not do that. On a more positive note, I really liked how the female relationships were portrayed in this book. I liked that they weren't so proper all the time, and that they weren't all so sweet, and they weren't all being so wholesome all of the time, and they weren't always dependable and reliable, because I don't think that that's realistic. Like, I obviously think that female friendships are great and a beautiful thing, and when they are, you know, based in love and respect, like any relationship, it's great. But there are also these elements of like gossip and lies and the hierarchy and who's BFF with who, and lots of talking behind people's backs and things like that that ruin friendships between girls and women. And I think that that was portrayed very well in this book. And also the way that Gita's friendship with, what's her name? With Saloni, it was portrayed, like how they were very good friends when they were young, and then they grew up and they grew apart, and then how they sort of came back together. And yeah, I thought that was really well done. I also appreciated that the focus isn't on like romantic relationships. It's more about the friendships and how they are not so simple. They're very complex relationships, and they're changing over time. They're not so static, and how they're also different. I feel like it would be very easy to confuse 5 Indian women for me as a Swedish person versus like the characters in Stolen. I think that the characters are written they're so vivid, they're so clearly set apart to me. How they speak and how they think and behave and all of that just makes them very individual as characters. Yeah, that was my experience. I would be very interested to know what you think about that. Like how Farah is pretending to be this like silly little girl who doesn't really understand things, and then she's like stabs you in the back. I thought the ending in this book was kind of perfect in a way. I felt like I didn't really care that much about the story, or like not that I didn't care about the story, but that wasn't the main takeaway for me. It wasn't like if the story was gonna unfold perfectly, like the plot line wasn't the main thing for me reading this book. It was more about, like I said, the female friendships and how people treat each other. Like those were much bigger takeaways for me reading it than the plot and like what happened at the end. That wasn't too important to me. So yeah, I would love to know what your thoughts are on the ending, and if you were more focused on the plot or if you were more focused on the social commentary and all of that. And to finish this video off, I thought I would answer the rest of Reney's questions. And if you have also read more than one of these books, I would love for you to also answer this in the comments. So her first question was, how would you rank the 3 books? I thought that Stolen was great, and I really want to read the second and third parts to this trilogy, but it wasn't living up to all of my expectations. I'm giving it a 4-star rating, and I think I'm giving this a 4-star rating as well. But this one, Bandit Queens, just comes out a little bit higher than this. And I mean, this is also a standalone book, so it's difficult to compare the two when the Stolen trilogy, or the Sapmi trilogy, I think it's called, isn't finished yet. So, but anyways, I think this would come second. It made me feel a lot. It made me think a lot. The plot line was interesting and fun, and the writing was fun, and the relationships were fun. But there were also a lot of heavy things in this book and infuriating events. And yeah, so I think that this is a very good book. But I'm going to put Before the Coffee Gets Cold as my number 1, I think. It was simple and deep and also beautiful. Like there were heavy topics in that as well, but they were sad but not mean like they are in this. Like in this book, people are horrible to other people. And in Before the Coffee Gets Cold, it's more like people are just living their lives and things happen, and that's very sad and you have to deal with that. But I wasn't ever angry reading that book. And not that that's bad. I don't know. It's a tough call between the Bandit Queens and Before the Coffee Gets Cold. But yeah, I think the writing in Before the Coffee Gets Cold is just beautiful and enjoyable, and I just really liked that experience. They both felt like stepping into completely different worlds. I mean, all three of these. Like reading all three of these felt like taking a trip around the world in the very best kinds of ways. So I think these were a very good mix of books to read in a month, and I enjoyed all of them. But yeah, number 1, number 2, number 3. The next question that Reney asked was, who was your favorite character in the books and why? And like I said, the different characters in the Bandit Queens really stood out to me. I wouldn't say favorite, but the character that stood out to me the most, or whose story stood out to me the most, was Parini, because of, yeah, her story just broke my heart and made me so mad. So she really stood out to me as a character that I really like empathized with. But other than that, I mean, I really liked Karim. He is the new love interest, and he's so kind, and he treats Gita so well without being like a pushover. He's still like has his own integrity and his own boundaries, but he's still respectful, and he listens, and he tries to understand and communicate about things, and he apologizes when he's in the wrong. And yeah, I just what a stand-up guy, you know, which is not a very high bar, but compared to the rest of the dudes in this book, he just seems like an angel. So yeah. From Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I guess I would say the wife in Husband and Wife. Yeah, just the way that she cares for her husband, I thought was really beautiful. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. And in Stolen, I have a harder time choosing a favorite character, which is annoying because I know that that's the book that Reney has also read. So Reney, I would love to know what your favorite character was in Stolen, because I have a hard time choosing one. I really liked the grandmother, who also had dementia, which was a rough month for me to read. But yeah, I liked the relationship between Elsa and her grandmother, and she was also really nice. Like, Elsa was very sweet to her grandmother. Yeah, she was very strong and kind and funny, and it just seemed like she was a very authentic person and a genuine person in how she acted and treated other people. And yeah, I just, she's one of the characters that stand out to me, so I guess I'm gonna say her. And then the last question from Reney was, have you read anything else by any of these authors, and what did you think of it? And I haven't. I mean, Bandit Queens is a debut novel, so there isn't anything else to read by Parini Shroff. Toshikazu Kawaguchi, I know there are more books in this series about this coffee shop, but I haven't read any of them, but I probably will. And I don't know what else he has written or what's been translated. But yeah, I would definitely want to read more of those stories. Ann-Helén Laestadius, who wrote Stolen. The second part is out in Swedish, and the third part is coming eventually, and they will both be translated, I'm assuming, into English. So I will definitely want to read those two. Other than that, I know that she has written books for kids or teens or young adults, like YA fiction, or for younger audience. And I haven't read any of those. I'm not sure I will, but I will definitely read number 2 and 3 in this trilogy. Okay, so I guess that's it. I would love to know your thoughts on this first book club video session meeting thing. And if you have any feedback for me, I'm open to it. Just be kind. But if you have any like thoughts on how we could do it differently, or what you liked and liked less, if you would like more questions to answer, or more structure, or more comparisons between the books, or less comparison, or I don't even know, please share that in the comments. And of course, also, if you have any thoughts and opinions about any of the books that you have read, or any questions about anything that you would like me to answer that I didn't in this video, about the books. Thank you so much for watching and being here and taking part in the discussion in the comments. I'm gonna try to have options out for book club in July and August out pretty soon, so that you can plan ahead a bit more for next time, especially for summer. So that's coming soon. And the books that we're reading for book club in June are The Wager by David Gran, Piranesi by Susanna Clark, and As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. If you have any thoughts about how to do that video for next time, let me know. And other than that, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Okay. Yeah.